second half of the symposium. Now, expectations for the international cooperation in education. We are very delighted to welcome 2 new panelists and the 4 previous presenters to join this discussion. May I introduce the members of the panelists? From far left on the stage, from Tokyo University, Professor Yuto Kitamura. University of Tokyo, Professor Kan Suzuki. And from JICA, the General Director of the Department of Human Development, Ms. Kamei, and Tsukuba University, Associate Professor Tetsuo Kyomen. Yamaha Corporation, Music Popularization Group Manager, AP Sales Division, Mr. Otake Yuji. Kagawa University Faculty of Medicine, Professor Yuko Shimizu. Now, Dr. Suzuki, Dr. Kitamura are a member of the expert panel for EduPort project, and there has been so many advice and comments made thus far. And we will open for your opinions and also the comments and the questions. So please type in your questions until the 4:50. Dr. Kitamura, please proceed with this session.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name is Kitamura from Tokyo University. I'm happy to moderate today. It was a very rich first part, and Professor Yoshida from Hiroshima University gave us very appropriate arguments to discuss. So later on, we would like to incorporate his comments into our discussion. Before we start the panel discussion, I would like to ask Professor Suzuki for some comments. So looking back on the first half. So thank you very much for all of your presentations earlier on. I'm one of the people who proposed this project. I had discussions with the people, the departments in charge, but there was COVID-19. So it was very difficult to continue this project as a result. We've been able to overcome those difficulties, and now we are restarting. Well, because we had those difficulties, I think we are now based on very deep insight. Each of you have been able to forge true partnerships with the respective countries. And that was the impression I had when I listened to all of you today. I'm very grateful for that. Kamei-san, you were part of the discussions within the advisory board as well. And JICA knows what is happening on site the best, and centering around JICA products, EduPort is now progressing smoothly. I'm very happy. The Papua New Guinea example and Cambodia you talked about. Now, I've been saying that the education in Japan after the Meiji era, the history of that, and I am teaching the overview of that in university as well. There are good points and bad points, but all of these points should be shared with the rest of the world. The Anglo-Saxon type of education spread widely as well, but the process is very different. So we are trying to catch up in many ways to the West in order to modernize. So there are bright spots and dark spots. So all of these should be shared. That is extremely important, I believe. San Kamei-san talked about that as well. Personally speaking, I was very impressed. And Professor Kyomen talked about Tokkatsu. Actually, in 2016, at the G7 Education Ministers meeting in Kurashiki, I took the ministers to see the cleaning and the school lunch as well. And the ministers also did the cleaning together, and also we looked at the bukatsu extracurricular activities. And also I was asked by Al Jazeera about tokkatsu activities, so I was able to debut on Al Jazeera. And I think it was the following year or maybe the year after that, I don't quite remember which, from Egypt, the vice minister of Egypt came with a delegation to look at the educational sites here. And at JICA office, I talked about tokkatsu to them, I remember. So education, we need to continue. That was in 2016, 2017. And as a result, all of this have led to what we have now. And we've seen much progress in each of the countries as well. I'm grateful. And Otake-san, well, I personally am very much interested in music education. So with Yamaha, I have had various discussions. So your success in Vietnam has been replicated to India, Brazil, and each of the regions, continents are quite different. But this has been spread throughout. So the roles of government, academia, schools, and private sector that we had initially when we started EduPort, and these were all coordinated together, and Yamaha was the engine for that. So everyone, if we bring together all of the good points, we can do something better. So we had that in mind, but I think we saw even better results than we had initially anticipated. So another reason why I think EduPort was a good idea. And also in Cambodia, there are school health rooms. And we are seeing progress. That is wonderful. I have been looking at the education in various different countries, and one of the characteristics of the Japanese schools is that there is health room in each of these schools. We can be proud of that. The children's health. And not only that, but if I may digress, after the Tohoku earthquake, schools become evacuation centers, and at that time, the health room function, inclusive of the personnel there, not just the hardware, that was extremely helpful, and it had an instrumental function to be played. So in the affected areas, the health of the people who were affected was maintained, and the health rooms were able to contribute to that. So this is something that we have been continuing in Japan, one of the very good points. And now this is spread to Cambodia. So it's mainly due to the efforts of Kagawa University. Actually, the central government needs to do more. But Kagawa University, thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. And there's just one more point that I would like to comment on. In December, OECD PISA 2022 was announced. And I was responsible for Asia launch. Professor Kitamura, thank you for your help there as well. So one of the characteristics of Japan is that the children's sense of belonging to school is quite high. That is good. And there are other issues outside of that in Japan, which I'm sure will be discussed later. So for a very long time, in Japan, schools were not just a place to give lessons, but it was a learning community. And we place a lot of importance on creating groups and colleagues. So this has persisted as a culture. And I think that has manifested itself, especially for 2022 with COVID-19. Various countries were facing various difficulties. And Japan, even despite that, it is mainly due to the efforts of teachers and faculty, but the sense of belonging has gone up and the academic level has gone up. Well-being and equity has also gone up. And it's only one of 4 countries. So placing importance on community, this kind of school culture, I think is a result of because we had that. And this is implemented through tokkatsu and gym class and music and art class. So these subjects and activities and the school health that supports that. So all of these are combined together to result in schools where children have a high sense of belonging. So I was thinking about that in December, and today, once again, I think the resolutions thereof of my understanding has risen. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Suzuki. And as is mentioned earlier, experience in Japan, how will be good or bad based upon our experiences, how we're going to share that all together and think about betterment of the education for the future, how we're going to collaborate. That needs to be explored. And from that point of view, during the presentations in the first half of the seminar, we have had a lot of learnings. Now, to reflect upon the first half of the session, there were several online questions that was raised, and there were some open questions that we were not able to cover. I'd like to raise questions to the panelists, and we want to get more answers. Now, our time is limited, and we only have 20 minutes or 25 minutes till the end of the panel session. In this panel session, we'd like to talk about when Japan engages more internal cooperation education, what direction, what area should we explore more, and in what way the partnership could be further evolved, and in such a situation, how the EduPort will be positioned. Though time is limited, I would like to hear insights from the panelists. So these are the big underlying topic per se, and I'd like to raise specific questions to the panelists. Now, aim at the large major directions. Now, as Professor Suzuki mentioned earlier, experiences and learning in Japan, how would that be best utilized, be it good or be it bad? And we would like to explore. And the questions that was raised for the first half, where we failed to answer was, for example, non-cognitive was mentioned. Several projects was adopted the concept of the non-cognitive capabilities, and Dr. Suzuki mentioned that the character of Japanese school is that through educational community, it is not just a academic achievement. However, it is a whole person-based ability that the students are encouraged to nurture. And as is discussed in the EduPort Symposium in the past, I think that there's a consensus toward the whole person-based education. And for that, non-cognitive capabilities is now drawing more attentions on the global area, not just in Japan, but for Tokkatsu project of Professor Kyomen, and also Otake-san's music projects. And non-cognitive capabilities is being discussed, but there are discussions about how to measure the non-cognitive capabilities. And the non-cognitive capabilities is, of course, is not very easy to discuss. But when you talk about non-cognitive, what particular aspects of non-cognitive capability that you are paying attention to, and that may be related to tokkatsu or music education, and if you think that is a strength, and when you talk about non-cognitive ability, what aspects of that is emphasized, and how you're going to measure such capability? If you could elaborate, be appreciated. And as Dr. Shimizu mentioned, there's approach to the health professionals in schools, and what particular interest that the faculty, other than the teachers, are interested in. So when new things like the school health is introduced to the school, what reactions that the other professors would have? And also gender-free bathroom is discussed. In Cambodia, are there any notion of a gender-free? And for that, are there any resistance against it? In Japan, diversity and inclusion is widely discussed, and LGBTQ is now widely talked about. And gender-free universals are being talked about quite a lot. But, well, in Cambodia, such a terminology may not be quite prevalent, and yet when students face a gender-free toilet, there any confusion. And not just limited to that, how are we going to match with the local culture in implementing some new ideas in education, be it Yamaha traditional music instruments versus the instruments that we give? That is actually challenges. Recorder is actually prepared in the tone scale of Western music. So it will not accommodate with the traditional instruments and music right away. Yet, how you're going to localize the Western instruments or musical instruments. And for Tokkatsu, there are many local practices, and some are considered outrageous. And how you could implement that in the local community. And when you think about educational cooperation, there are some gaps, there are some mismatch, and we need to carefully monitor. And at JICA, how you are trying to overcome this gap. Well, Kami-san, I will ask you a very big question toward the end, but ultimately, when you talk about the Japanese education cooperation, then what is the desirable way of extending cooperation? If there's an idea, I'd like each panelist to answer. But I believe that time is run out. Therefore, just may I add another point? And beyond that, what should EduPort should be in the future? If you could elaborate that, be appreciated. So there's a very rough questions that I raised earlier. On top of that, if everyone can add on to say what additional area that EduPort should focus, what type of collaboration would you like to nurture more? Is there any difficulties in using the EduPort scheme? What is not available, and any criticisms against the EduPort? If you could be very frank in your opinion, be appreciated. Now, we will start from the vice versa. Professor Shimizu first, please.
Thank you very much. So there are 2 points that, or 2 questions that you gave me. So concerning the first one, so what is the impression of non-health teachers? And then the second is concerning gender-free toilets. Were people awkward about that? Concerning the first point, I'm sure you know well about Cambodia. From 2018 in Cambodia until now, teachers were educated in junior colleges, and now it's transferred to 4-year colleges. I think there's 2 credits. The health courses were placed into the curriculum. So now health teachers are being educated, and they are graduates already. But when we created the health rooms, we had a plan to have a teacher in charge for that, but there was no one available. And actually, who actually reside in those health rooms? These are already retired teachers, and also female teachers who, because of child raising, they were taking a leave from the schools, or the vice principals will become the teachers responsible for the health rooms. And now the people who are graduates of these schools now will go through the teacher training, and then they will be allocated to the health rooms as well. And so for these health teachers, it's not as if all teachers are responsible for their for health rooms. I don't know what everyone thought, but the majority of people, these classes they took in junior college, it was only 2 credits they said concerning health, and those were emergency first aid, and the other was taking care of injuries. So these are the only 2 courses. Aside from that, not many teachers knew about others. So even if we give first aid kits to all of these schools, well, tiger balm. So for example, if people have headaches, they will rub it on their heads, and if they have someone with a stomach ache, they would use it on their stomachs. So they wanted the tiger balm in all the first aid boxes. So the knowledge concerning health, they don't have an opportunities to have that kind of information. So they were concerned. But also they recognize the importance of having teachers in health rooms, and that is why most schools want such teachers. And the other one is concerning gender-free toilets. When I say gender-free toilets, this is something I said to the Japanese audience. So, for example, in our case, before planning this, we went to the local site, and with the NGO who were collaborating with us, they counted all the toilets in 32 schools, and for 900 students, there were only 2 toilets. So 900 students, 2 toilets. Yeah, of course, it is not gender specific. So we created the model for the toilets. However, there are schools where there were no toilets, and if we only create 1 toilet, we cannot make it gender specific, and that is why we said gender free. So it's whether it was intentional or not. But in any case, before planning for the Japanese and Cambodia's local people, the toilet situation, we did not know at all about that. So, but meaning that stringent preparation is required. I hope that answered your question.
Well, thank you very much for clarifying the point. Another point that I wanted you to mention that Dr. Shimizu mentioned already, as Dr. Suzuki mentioned earlier, cost and continuity is also a challenge. And in the teacher training, some are the health and hygiene type of a course to be included, and with that, such a minimum level of class would be very good, so that the teacher would have a minimum knowledge about the hygiene and the health, and that would be quite a sustainable approach. And second point was exactly convincing. And I asked about your opinion about EduPort, but we will spare that for the last round. Maybe we may be able to have another round. So for the future EduPort, we will ask the comments in the next round. So next is Mr. Otake. Otake-san, please. As Professor Yoshida's question, there are 3. First is non-cognitive capability, and the second is a consistency with the traditional music, and the third is the teacher's training and what is the cost for sustaining this impact. First, regarding non-cognitive capability, there are many aspects, and yet in Egypt, the Tokyo University of Arts and Culture, that we fully collaborate, and motivation and the self-esteem and cooperation and the discipline that we are able to measure. And in different country, we would adopt different mechanisms to measure, and maybe the answer may be different. But as we make progress, what was interesting was, in the case of music education, there's no clear one single answer, like arts and painting as well. Nothing good or bad. There's no winners or losers. And that is securing a high level of freedom. People can exercise high level of creativity. And as a second point, for the traditional music, that is in fact a very difficult one, where the recorder tone will not reproduce traditional music. However, the keyboard, which you can put on the desk, there's a harmonic, which is another instrument. There are some instruments very similar to traditional instruments. And the keyboards, we say hardware and software. Manipulating the software, we could actually make the sounds of the keyboards very close to the traditional music. And in harmonium, that while you are playing, you could make a harmony, and therefore you can make a very traditional-like music as well. There are trial and error, and ultimately, people love the local music ultimately, and we want the people to enjoy fully. So that's something that we do. And cost for sustaining this impact, what would like be? For that part, it is exactly true that we accelerate until the implementation, and once it is implemented and nothing finishes with that implementation. And Indonesia, we are working over 8 years or 10 years so far. And for example, classes for music, when these classes are implemented and how we could continue doing that is really key. Indonesia, government's initiative at Indonesia, they've launched e-learning platform, and we provided some contents. And by doing so, it could be used as lexicon, or they could embed the contents into their whole curriculum. And of course, contents creation costs, of course, but use the platform owned by the governments of a partner country and put our contents on top of that could be one of the solutions for sustaining the impact. An example in Japan, in fact, it's really useful. Japanese music instruments is really good. For the wind instruments, every summer students go to the competition, and that is structured well from the very local community to prefectures and nationwide. Such a structure will actually improve and maintain the motivation of the students. And in Japan, we have a very natural tendency of making such architecture, but that could be replicated in other parts of the world in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Concerning the mechanism that you mentioned, so basically to utilize what already exists and how we can include other aspects, but not otherwise, maybe to propose a new institution. So Professor Kyoming, I have a question to you as well, a new question. Tokkatsu is focused on in Asia, so inclusive of the introduction and also the membership, community building, and also stewardship. So from a macro perspective, if you can compare against these other non-cognitive skills. So from a global perspective, from a macroscopic perspective, how exactly is it? I'm not sure whether or not you can answer that question now, but if you can just answer the previous question in addition to this question, if you can. Thank you very much. So first of all, concerning your question, I think it is exactly as you say. In Tokkatsu, this is the Japanese model. But extracurricular activities are done elsewhere as well, and they have each country has their own approaches. So it's very important to learn from each other. So not just communicating Tokkatsu, but also learn from other countries and brush this up also is very important. And based on that, the non-cognitive capabilities and sustainability, Professor Yoshida talked about this. So if I can just combine these in my answer, non-cognitive capabilities are existent on the content, so there are cultural differences. For example, in Japan, when we say cooperation and responsibility, is it the same as cooperation and responsibility in Egypt? And also, there's the in JICA also there's a baseline and beginning survey, doing a qualitative survey. So we need to think about the metrics together with the local people, or else we will not be able to see the quantitative aspects. And same thing for the qualitative aspect as well. So within our project, we are very creative. So we didn't look only at the self-assessment of the children, but also parents and teachers, and we looked at it from various perspectives. And that is where a possibility may lie. However, before we do the assessment, to acquire non-cognitive capabilities, there has to be, we have to look at education from a long perspective as well. So just because we did activities doesn't mean that that kind of skill is going to be acquired immediately. And it's not linear like cognitive skills. So we see non-linear development as well. So from that perspective, primary, secondary, higher education, how do we connect all of these educational levels is also extremely important. And sorry if I misunderstand. As JICA, initially, when carrying out international cooperation, we looked at the history and we started with the Tibet technology and vocation and also higher education and teachers development. So those were the focal points, and basic education has recently been added. So this historical background, if we take a look at that, even in the same country, there may be a lack of linkages. That is what I thought in Egypt. So in terms of higher education, there is a teacher training issue that is involved. This is also very important. And Tokkatsu, as you know, there's no textbook for that. So it's not just material development. There is a limitation to that. In order to make this sustainable, there has to be teachers in higher education in Egypt who can teach Tokkatsu so that teachers can be nurtured that already have Tokkatsu skills. So the system also needs to be reformed. And that is why, as I mentioned earlier, there is a diploma issue. And maybe by introducing this, it will become even more sustainable. And Tokkatsu will place more burden on the teachers. It was mentioned. That is true, but it's not due to Tokkatsu per se. It's the preparation where the burden is higher. So from that perspective, then in Egypt, maybe there can be Tokkatsu that does not require preparation in order to make this sustainable. And that is something Japan cannot do. And that is why by trying that, perhaps Tokkatsu in Japan can be promoted further.
Thank you very much. Regarding JICA, I want the Kami-san to answer later. In JICA, for example, the math and science education in Cambodia, local people should be able to draft the textbook, and therefore the capacity building was made so that they can write and draft the textbook on their own. And as Professor Kyomin mentioned, based upon that, are there any response from JICA would be very much appreciated. And toward the last, that was really important. Is there anything to return back to the Japanese education? Well, we have a Tokkatsu which doesn't incur a lot of preparation. That needs to be explored more because teachers are really hard workers, and there are so many tasks. And maybe preparation we could skip to begin with. There's some notice about this, and making us notice about something is really an outcome that could be returned back to Japan. Kame-san, thank you very much. There were many perspectives raised, and I'm not sure which one to answer first. So, very refreshing point in regard to the teacher training in Cambodia. And I'd like to talk about the sustainability of this type of impact. As Associate Professor Kyomin mentioned, that the JICA failed to do a basic education to begin with. That is actually accurate, very correct. JICA, or Japanese ODA, providing some assistance to the very fundamental education for developing countries that started out in the 2000s. to begin with. Prior to that was actually the experience from before the end of the Second War. Endeavoring into the fundamental education of developed countries was something that is considered as interference of a sovereignty, and therefore the occupational training was the first one to do, or something besides the core courses provided in the country is something that we explored. And now we were trying to improve from the peripheral area of education. And there was a movement to work more on the elementary school education. For example, science, math teachers. We started to provide the training of the teachers and so forth. For the last 20 years, we have many trials and errors in that regard. And one of the areas which we started to recognize as most important one to address is, of course, for short term, it is extremely difficult. For example, teacher training in Cambodia, which starts out for those who graduated from higher education is not the teacher. In Japan, elementary school, middle school, there's 2 additional years of training schools. And after the end of Pol Pot administration, there were some additional teacher. But when we look at the ASEAN's market growth, Cambodia government and the minister have strongly realized that quality of teachers has to be respected more. With that, the teacher education has to be raised to the university college education level. And in the government administration recently started, they've made such a change. And the system needs to be carefully monitored. From sustaining the impact, what needs to be done is, from the fiscal point of view, what type of a scheme will be useful to make impact viable in education, in fundamental education in Asian countries? 5% of the budget needs to be spent for the basic education. Japan failed to do so. And there are diverse discussions that could happen, but in developing countries, on permanent basis and pursuing a quality of education, what needs to be done? There were many discussions ongoing in Cambodia. The teachers studying from high school graduate versus university graduates, their pay grades are the same. That doesn't make sense. So there has to be some policy change need to be made. And fantastically, education minister was very proactive, and the teachers who graduate from the University of Teacher Training, the pay of a salary would be different and higher as well. So such a very strenuous effort had to be made. Another point, now there are some mismatch and a gap that we need to rectify in the educational setting. Well, in fact, the partner countries, what they want need to be respected, and there are many ways of to respect. My suggestion is to offer multiple options so that they can choose out of the options, and ultimate a decision has to be made by the partner country rather than Japan's side to be made. And the genderless toilet is something that I talk about. I get involved in the gender efforts, and JICA in India, in metro, the female-only train car is introduced, and attitude of in favor or in not in favor is quite different. And World Bank official says that implementation of the women-only car is actually promotes the gender divide, but not for the local people. So people in the society will have to make decision or choices. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was very important, especially the last part. I think a very important point was emphasized. We are running out of time. And now the discussion is becoming heated, but we're running out of time. So as I mentioned earlier, concerning EduPort, the future of EduPort, I would like to ask you to comment for 30 seconds each. So in one word, please. But before that, there's one point I'd like to say. There's an online question. I was able to confirm that there are many good things about the Japanese-style education, but at the same time, in schools, children are too controlled. So there's pressure to adhere to others, and maybe developing critical thinking is quite difficult. So there are some negative aspects still in Japanese schools. And so that is another question that was raised. So very sorry. Concerning the last part, what is the direction for EduPort going forward? Starting from Professor Shimizu, one word each, please. So, as was mentioned by the professor from Hiroshima University, so what to do about this? So by establishing the health room, we found a new topic. We talked about the cooperation organizations, for example, how about first aid, and also the training of medical professionals is not being done properly. So this is another point that Kabao University realized. So EduPort can provide recommendations for support from Japan going forwards. There are many such opportunities, so we hope that this will also be systemized.
Thank you very much. So the mechanisms that will be open and developed further. Thank you. There are 2 points. First, like we've did in the past, like exhibition, and also when I joined in some events overseas, I hope that government could be more proactive in that regard. And UNESCO conference was highlighting culture and in that area, and I took part, but presence of Japan was not strong enough. And we are hoping to see that more, because when you go overseas, you will see the benefits and strengths of Japan more. So you need to have enhanced presence. Next is just a comment. The name recognition of EduPort need to be strengthened. At least the Japanese embassy's presence of EduPort need to be enhanced, and it is going up for 8 years and so forth. And Metis officials or former officials are well recognizing, so it is improving at this moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. With COVID, there was a slowdown of overseas development, but I think we once again need to rethink this. Professor Kyomen, please. Thank you very much. So what I have in mind is concerning Japanese-style education. There's a report from Kyoto University as well, and there is the issue of ethics. So bilateral learning, I think, is extremely important. And linked with what was mentioned earlier on, what I'm thinking of concerning research going forward. So what we learn from the Egyptian schools, make that into a protocol so that it can be implemented in Japan. So perhaps classrooms that fuse Japan and Egypt, try that in Japan, and then bring that back to Egypt. So we can learn from each other. So Japanese-style education, I don't think is complete, and it will continue to change and evolve. So based on that assumption, we need to continue to communicate and also to gain the demand from the other parties as well. So what we are communicating from the Japan side needs to be renewed constantly.
Thank you very much. Your point exactly. And we are hoping that being a part of the good practices, Egypt's Tokkatsu and the reapplication of that idea to Japan need to be explored, and I hope that you will pursue that path. Kami-san, please. Thank you for all the comments. Now, as Mr. Kitayama mentioned earlier, regarding the 50th anniversary of Japan, ASEAN relations, and the global task initiatives, and Japan facing a tremendous level of competition, and we are losing the grounds, and everyone has such a concern now. And it is indeed that the GDP is now falling behind the other growing countries, and there are some forecasts where the JICA have made, and in 10 years from now or 20 years from now, when we look at the leading countries, Japan is no longer a part of the list either. And to just reflect upon this and what we want from EduPort, we need to improve education in Japan. And there are so many returns that we may have to get back. And we want EduPort to allocate more funds. And on that point, in fact, JICA is not able to allocate funds because Japan is dedicated to ODA. Therefore, our role is to make contribution to the partner country. And that is how the system is put in place. So we could ask you to do the publication of the data, but we cannot ask for the government to allocate the budget to return the benefits back to Japan. And I hope that the EduPort will do that more. Another point, we are working with private entities to address many challenges. And in education area, we can't broaden the participants widely yet. So working with the EduPort members, so inclusive of awareness raising, we want to invite more private sector player so that we can enjoy wider reach. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So we hope that there will be further collaboration between JICA and the private sector by utilizing the EduPort framework. And also the money issue. Not only mixed, but I've been talking recently with mixed people about the Board of Education. Is located in each prefecture, in each local government, so they also need to be involved. So the local schools and the Board of Education. In that case, the funding source may not only be the national government, but it can be from the local municipalities, local governments. So the funding should be diversified, and maybe the private sector can also contribute to cooperation as well. So the funding scheme also needs to be diversified. That is extremely important. So lastly, Professor Suzuki, I would like to ask you to wrap up today's symposium. If you can just comment, please. It is quite difficult to summarize. I don't think I need to add anything. So bilaterally do something together so that we can return the good points to each other. So the Egyptian classrooms, it seems that the teacher-initiated comments are lower now than in Japan. So why is that? Where is the major point? So through our mutual efforts, we can come to a new stage. In music education, also in health rooms as well, I think there are such discoveries. So very open bilateral platform has been created, and I think that is very good. I once again appreciated that. I should summarize. Actually, what I wanted to say was in June of last year, the new basic plan for education was created, and it's quite bold. So one of the pillars in Japan is not Japan originated, but Japan type well-being is included. I don't have time to go into detail today. And OECD Education 2030 Bureau member, I'm a part of that as well. And OECD is now thinking about 2040. So what is the purpose of education? We need to once again have a discussion on that. So Japan originated well-being. Well, Anglo-Saxon or US or Western initiated well-being is acquired element from the control pillar. So it is to go up the ladder. That is the reason for education. But rather than that, well, when you think of G20, G7, especially the G7 in Kanazawa and Okayama, we had ministerial meetings. So not just going up the ladder. And there is peer pressure as well. We need to take care of that. But there has to be collaborative element to create a good community. Through online education, AI drills were utilized. So 20th century academic skills, to acquire that, we don't have to be there in one classroom. But so what is the raison d'etre of schools when we think of that? as was presented today, I think some of the elements mentioned will remain. And perhaps those are the good points of Japan. Or conversely, we mentioned that the sense of belonging is high amongst children. 90% of the children are satisfied with their friends, but 10% have very severe issues. They can't go to school or others. So we were thinking of being bold enough to communicate from Japan within the plan. So in order to polish this up further, the bilateral platform that you have all created. So we are still in the draft of a draft. There are many rough points still. And we need to be substantive. So in each of the sites, together with the teachers and parents and local community and children, they all need to get together to digest. And while doing so, create something new. So we need to continue that kind of process. So maybe platform community or global community for that. A 21st century, 22nd century education. Together, we need to think about that. And we need true partners for that, to hear harsh words if necessary. So I think we are in the mid-process of developing such partners. I'm very happy about that, and I hope this can become much deeper. So I was able to feel the potential for that going forward, and we hope that you would continue collaboration in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Every year, Professor Suzuki, that along with him, I am joining the symposium. And this year, we were able to go into the very contents of what we do. We so far talk about the formalities and architecture and what are the Japanese unique aspects and so forth. But this year, we were able to work on the contents of hands-on work that all the players are doing now. And I thank all of the panelists and the speakers and all the people, stakeholders in person as well as on online basis. And we are able to grow this EduPort platform, and name recognition is improving as well. Yet there are so many things that we need to work more. There's a big vision where we should not forget. At the same time, a Japanese approach to make full efforts, thorough efforts on the grounds. And the Japanese school is actually organized that way. Japanese school teachers, from global point of view, are very sensitive and careful. And because of that reason, maybe that is considered as a waste or inefficiencies, like Professor Kyome mentioned. Maybe teachers are doing too much. And I hope that the EduPort will develop to discuss various ways going forward. I hope to ask your support going forward. And today, despite a very limited time period, we were able to hear a very precious opinions. And please give a round of applause to all of the panelists today. Thank you very much for the panelists and the moderator. We are running behind the schedule, but Secretariat would like to ask all of the participants to fill in the questionnaire form today. It is inserted in the handout that we distributed today. Also for online participants, there will be a feedback link provided to you, so please give us your feedback. And EduPort Japan email magazines, please register your email address. With this, we would like to conclude FY23 EduPort Symposium is to conclude. And thank you all very much for your participation.